Welcome to the debate. What happens when an NFL front office terrifies itself into, bidding against a ghost? Today, we are looking at the Indianapolis Colts 2026 offseason. It is really a fascinating case study in how one single financial decision with a starting quarterback can trigger a chain reaction that completely restructures an entire offensive system.
Yeah, it is easily one of the most polarizing off seasons in recent memory. And it's important to establish right up front that our discourse today emerges directly from recent sports media analysis. Specifically, we're looking at the evaluations and the grades handed out by ESPN's Seth Walder, along with the corresponding reports on the Colts' roster moves and player rehabilitations.
Right. We are looking at the exact intersection of salary cap economics, medical risk, and schematic philosophy.
Exactly.
So, the central question we're unpacking today is this. Did the Colts front office make prudent, calculated investments to secure offensive stability, or did they fundamentally misread the market and misallocate critical resources? I will be defending the Colts strategy today. I argue that securing quarterback Daniel Jones and wide receiver Alec Pierce were necessary, forward-thinking moves for a front office and coaching regime heading into a critical season where they had to show progress. They stabilized the absolute most important variables on the roster.
And I will be taking the opposing view here. I argue that the front office essentially negotiated against itself by completely mismanaging the transition tag. This failure to read the room and understand leverage resulted in massive financial overpays. They took on immense medical risk, and it led to the entirely avoidable loss of proven veteran talent.
Let's lay out the big picture of what Indianapolis was trying to achieve, though. General Manager Chris Ballard and this front office, they prioritized continuity. Let's just look at the facts. Before his Achilles injury last season, Daniel Jones was experiencing a genuine resurgence in head coach Shane Steichen's system.
Well, he had a good stretch, sure.
He led this team to an 8-5 record. He was protecting the football, boasting a stellar 19-8 touchdown-to-interception ratio. And I see why you think that, but let me give you a different perspective on the contract they gave him. This 2-year, $88 million deal is not the reckless, blank-check gamble that critics claim it is.
It's still a massive financial commitment for a guy on crutches.
But structurally, it is essentially a highly protected $50 million one-year prove-it deal. The Colts have a built-in out if the injury lingers. Furthermore, securing Alec Pierce, a player coming off a 1,000-yard breakout season with vastly improved route-running chops, on a 4-year deal ensures long-term stability for Steichen's offense. They lock down their foundation.
I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that. Let me tell you why. The entire process was flawed from the very first domino because it demonstrated a complete failure to understand market dynamics. Yes, Daniel Jones played well for 13 games, but we cannot gloss over the fact that he suffered a torn Achilles.
It's a severe injury, I'm not denying that.
Historically, medically, and practically, that is the single toughest injury for a professional athlete to return to form from. Because of that injury, he had virtually no open market. By using the transition tag on Jones unnecessarily, the Colts were forced to bypass a highly logical $27.3 million franchise tag on Alec Pierce.
They still got the deal done with Pierce, though.
Yeah, but they panicked. Because they couldn't tag him, they handed Pierce a $114 million contract with $60 million fully guaranteed, right before he required ankle surgery. They bid against ghosts, misread the market, and paid top-of-the-market dollar for massive flashing red injury risks.
Okay, let's drill down into that first domino then. Because as you rightly pointed out, everything stems from the decision to use the transition tag on Daniel Jones. We have to view this through the lens of a regime that simply cannot afford to start over at the most important position in sports.
But that is exactly why the tag was a panic move. It wasn't strategic at all. It was entirely fear-based. And we really have to look at the actual mechanics of the transition tag to understand why it was such a colossal misstep.
Wait, pause there for a second because I want to make sure the listeners catch this nuance. For the audience who might hear these terms thrown around in March but aren't cap experts, what exactly is the mechanical difference between the transition tag and the franchise tag?
It's a crucial distinction. The franchise tag locks a player in at the average of the top 5 salaries at his position. And if another team tries to sign him, they have to give you 2 first-round draft picks. It is an ironclad wall.
Right, nobody is giving up 2 first-rounders.
Exactly. Now, the transition tag, which the Colts used on Jones, guarantees the player a salary based on the top 10 salaries at his position. But critically, it doesn't give you any draft pick compensation if you choose not to match an outside offer. It simply gives you the right of first refusal. You just get to say, okay, we'll match that contract.
Right, so it establishes a baseline floor and lets the market dictate his actual value, giving the Colts the final say.
Sure, but here is the fatal flaw in that logic. Who exactly were the Colts afraid of? I mean, which rival franchise was going to swoop in and offer $40+ million a year to a 29-year-old quarterback coming off a freshly torn Achilles?
It only takes one desperate team.
But they forfeited all of their financial leverage to protect themselves against a phantom bidder. There was no market. They could have easily let him test the waters, realized it was freezing cold, and signed him to a cheaper 2-year deal without burning any tag at all.
I think you are severely underestimating the desperation of quarterback-needy teams in the NFL. Securing a starting quarterback in a make-or-break season is like buying flood insurance when you live on the coast. You don't wait to see if the market drops when your entire livelihood is on the line. Could they have really afforded to play chicken with their starting QB?
When the quarterback has a torn Achilles,
Yes.
you absolutely can play chicken because nobody else is driving on that road.
But imagine if another team with a desperate situation, say a franchise that struck out in the draft or a general manager trying to save his own job, decided to take a flyer on a front-loaded deal just to see if Jones could play by November. If the Colts lose Jones, their entire 2026 season goes up in smoke.
They have backups.
They have Anthony Richardson, who remains a developmental question mark, and Riley Leonard. That is not a viable safety net for a coaching staff trying to win now. They needed certainty, and the transition tag bought them the exclusive window to negotiate that certainty. Furthermore, the medical data matters here. The front office had internal metrics that outside teams simply didn't have.
Oh, come on. Medical metrics in the spring are notoriously optimistic. Every coach says their guy is ahead of schedule.
But they are tracking real, tangible milestones. Albert Breer's reporting confirms that Jones met all his rehabilitation marks this past spring and is expected to participate in team drills by late July. The medical staff's confidence validated the front office's financial commitment. They didn't just guess, they tracked his recovery meticulously, and they paid to ensure he didn't even get on a plane to visit another city.
Listen, being on track in July for 7-on-7 passing drills in shorts is a vastly different universe from evading a 300-pound defensive tackle in a collapsing pocket in September.
Of course. The live reps are different.
We have to talk about how the Achilles actually dictates a quarterback's mechanics. It isn't just about straight-line running. The Achilles tendon is the primary driver of explosive force when a quarterback plants his back foot to throw. It generates the torque required to drive the football into tight windows.
Right, the kinetic chain.
Exactly. If he doesn't trust that tendon, his mechanics break down, his throws sail, and he cannot escape the rush. ESPN's Seth Walder correctly pointed out that the structure of the final contract is mutually beneficial now, but they paid a massive premium to skip the line for a ride nobody else was waiting for.
And I still maintain that skipping the line is exactly what you do when you are trying to stabilize an offense. But let's follow your logic, because that quest for certainty at quarterback had a direct ripple effect on the rest of the roster. Let's look at the wide receiver market, specifically the Alec Pierce extension.
Right. The direct consequence of your quote-unquote flood insurance is that they burned their one tag for the offseason. That cap paralysis, we are already seeing the casualties of it.
Well, let's look at the numbers.
Because they used the transition tag on Jones, they completely altered the financial mechanism available to retain Alec Pierce. Without the franchise tag at their disposal, they couldn't give Pierce a 1-year, $27.3 million prove-it deal. Instead, they were forced into a corner, handing him a 4-year, $114 million contract.
Which makes him the 14th highest paid wide receiver in the NFL. I wouldn't classify that as an unforced error. I see it as highly proactive roster management. Yes, guaranteeing $60 million right before he underwent ankle surgery is unfortunate timing in hindsight, but you are paying for the trajectory of the player.
If you're an NFL fan listening to this, you're probably screaming at your steering wheel right now, asking why any team would guarantee $60 million to a guy with exactly one elite season on his resume right before surgery. And that is exactly my point.
You're overstating the surgery. It was a cleanup procedure.
But when a front office guarantees that kind of money, they are supposed to be paying for certainty. But the Colts essentially purchased extremely expensive hope.
The NFL cap isn't just about what a player is worth today. It's a futures market. Paying Pierce $28.5 million a year looks like a massive overpay right now. I will grant you that. But it is an inflation hedge.
An expensive hedge.
The insight here is that in the modern NFL, the earliest overpay almost always becomes the most valuable bargain. With the salary cap expanding by tens of millions of dollars every spring and the wide receiver market resetting almost monthly, being the 14th highest paid receiver is going to look incredibly cheap in 2 years.
It only looks like a bargain if he actually continues to produce like a true top-tier receiver. Right now, we have seen countless flashes from receivers who put together one magical year and then regress to the mean when defensive coordinators get a full offseason of tape on them.
But if they franchise-tagged Pierce and he produced another 1,000-yard season this year, his market rate next offseason would skyrocket to $35 million a year or more. Aren't you ignoring the opportunity cost of waiting? By locking him in now, they insulate themselves against next year's inevitable market inflation.
I am absolutely not ignoring the opportunity cost. I am properly weighing it against the risk profile. The risk of a player regressing or suffering a lingering physical issue like, say, an ankle problem that requires surgery immediately after signing far outweighs the risk of having to pay a premium for a guy who genuinely proves he is elite over multiple seasons.
So you'd rather pay $35 million next year?
If he proves it, you're happy to write the check. If he doesn't, you are now stuck with dead money that completely paralyzes your ability to build out the rest of the roster.
Just to clarify for our listeners, when you say dead money paralyzes the roster, break down exactly how that mechanical failure happens.
Absolutely. Dead money is the guaranteed money you have already paid to a player, usually through a signing bonus, that has not yet been accounted for against the salary cap.
Right, because it's prorated over the life of the deal.
Exactly. So if Alec Pierce's ankle injury saps his explosiveness and he regresses terribly, the Colts can't just cut him. If they do, all of that unpaid guaranteed cap hit accelerates onto the current year's ledger. So you end up with $30 million or $40 million taking up space on your salary cap for a player who isn't even on your team. It means you can't sign free agents, you can't pay your offensive linemen, and you lose good players. It is suffocating.
Which transitions us perfectly to the third major consequence of this offseason strategy. Because of the heavy financial commitments to Jones and Pierce to secure that offensive ceiling, the front office had to make sacrifices.
Huge sacrifices. That sacrifice was trading longtime veteran receiver Michael Pittman Jr. to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, on the surface, moving a player of Pittman's caliber seems like a strict negative, but I argue this allowed the Colts to completely restructure the receiver room to better fit Steichen's specific offensive system.
Restructure? It didn't just restructure it. It gutted the core reliability of the passing game. Pittman was the ultimate security blanket in Indianapolis.
He was reliable, yes. Now, without him, they are entirely reliant on depth pieces and prove-it options. They are looking at guys like Nick Westbrook-Ikine and special teams players like Ashton Dulin to step up and fill the void at the third receiver spot. That is a massive, tangible downgrade in pure offensive talent.
Let's talk about the specific functional roles these players fill, though, because that is where the genius of this move lies. You called Pittman a security blanket, and you're right. He was their ex-receiver.
Correct. The guy who lines up on the line of scrimmage, usually isolated on the boundary, and has to beat press coverage physically.
Exactly. Pittman excels at beating physical cornerbacks one-on-one on the outside. But Steichen's offensive system does not fundamentally need a traditional, highly paid ex-receiver to function on third downs.
Come on, every passing offense needs someone who can win a one-on-one matchup when the defense knows you are passing.
But Steichen solves that problem through scheme, not just raw talent. Let's explain how he does this. Instead of isolating a guy on the outside, Steichen uses condensed splits. He lines his receivers up incredibly close to the offensive tackles.
Right, creating a tighter formation.
Right. By condensing the formation, it naturally creates traffic in the middle of the field. It forces defensive backs to play slightly softer coverage so they don't get picked off by crossing routes. Then, Steichen utilizes extensive pre-snap motion.
Yeah, the motion is key.
He sends a player like Ashton Dulin sprinting across the formation right before the snap. This gives Dulin a running start against flat-footed cornerbacks. The system manufactures separation so the player doesn't have to win purely with brute strength off the line of scrimmage.
I understand the theory behind condensed splits and motion. It's brilliant. It's exactly what the Rams and the 49ers do. But theory often collides violently with reality in the NFL. Surviving this salary cap by relying on scheme is one thing, but relying on a core special teamer to execute that scheme on high-leverage offensive snaps is incredibly risky.
You are vastly underselling Ashton Doolin's offensive capability and how he fits this exact ecosystem. Listen to what offensive coordinator Jim Bob Cooter said about him during spring minicamp.
Coach speak.
No, he explicitly praised Doolin's ability to line up literally anywhere on the field, to get down and dirty in the blocking game, and to take the ball on jet sweeps. Doolin's ability to seamlessly transition from cracking down on a linebacker in the run game to executing a dynamic route makes him a perfect fit for a WR3 role here. That's an interesting point you make about pure talent, though I would frame it differently. Does paying top-of-the-market money for a possession receiver like Pittman restricts their ability to field a complete dynamic roster? Isn't replacing him with a versatile, low-cost asset like Doolin exactly how smart front offices survive the salary cap?
Well, if Doolin can actually execute the role against starting defensive backs, then yes, it's brilliant. I am not taking anything away from Ashton Doolin, the football player. He was a second-team All-Pro in 2021 as a special teamer. He is incredible as a gunner, downing punts, recovering fumbles. He is the quintessential glue guy.
He's a phenomenal athlete.
But we have to be realistic about sample sizes. Doolin has 40 career receptions on 70 targets over 7 full seasons in the league. Asking him to consistently beat starting NFL cornerbacks in man coverage on 3rd and 7 because Pittman is in Pittsburgh represents a fundamental structural flaw in your team-building philosophy.
But again, he isn't being asked to win isolated man coverage on the boundary. He's being schemed into space. By reallocating the massive contract Pittman would have commanded, the Colts are able to maintain the depth of their offensive line and their defensive front. It is an interconnected puzzle.
Here is the problem with that puzzle, though. When a defense doesn't have to worry about bracketing Michael Pittman underneath, they can easily roll their safety coverage over the top toward Alec Pierce to take away the deep ball.
They'll try.
That means your depth receivers have to win their underneath matchups quickly. If Doolin or Westbrook-Ikeen are slowed down, or if the motion gets jammed up at the line of scrimmage, Daniel Jones is going to be holding the ball in a collapsing pocket. And what did we just establish about Jones?
He's rehabbing.
He has a recovering Achilles. He doesn't have the mobility to extend the play, and he might not have the lower body confidence to step up and take a hit while delivering the ball. If the scheme doesn't work perfectly, the quarterback is put in imminent danger.
The heavy investments in Daniel Jones and Alec Pierce were about securing the explosive ceiling of the offense while trusting the coaching staff's schematic brilliance to elevate versatile players like Doolin to raise the floor. You can't pay a premium at every single position.
You can't, but you also shouldn't create a scenario where your entire passing game relies on a quarterback with a torn Achilles trusting an ankle surgery recovering deep threat, while a career special teamer replaces your most reliable chain mover.
To bring our arguments together, my position stands firm that the Colts executed a pragmatic, necessary stabilization of their premium positions. They managed the downside risk with a clever, team-friendly structure on Daniel Jones's contract, and they locked up an explosive pass catcher in Alec Pierce before the market inflation could completely price them out of his services.
At a very high cost.
The trade of Michael Pittman was the necessary collateral damage of a hard salary cap, but it ultimately allows him to field a deeper, more scheme-specific roster utilizing highly versatile assets. They built a team tailored exactly to their head coach's vision.
And I maintain that this offseason will be studied in front offices for years as a masterclass in market miscalculation. They panicked and negotiated against ghosts for a quarterback with a devastating injury.
We'll see about that.
That initial misstep with the transition tag forced a chain reaction. That reaction led to an exorbitant, heavily guaranteed contract for a receiver with only one great year who immediately needed surgery. And it culminated in the loss of their most reliable offensive weapon. The logic was reactive, it was fundamentally flawed, and it placed the absolute burden of success on scheme rather than talent.
despite our different views on the process and the financial mechanisms, I think where we absolutely converge today is that the success of this entire Colts offseason strategy hinges unequivocally on the medical outcomes.
Oh, without a doubt. We can debate the salary cap and condensed splits all day, but if Daniel Jones' Achilles isn't structurally sound, if he lacks the explosion to plant and throw, or if Alec Pierce's ankle injury lingers and saps his deep speed, the contractual mechanisms we've debated today will become an anchor that sinks this entire regime. It all comes down to biology at this point.
It really highlights the immense complexity of NFL front office economics and roster construction. It is never just a simple debate about who is the better football player on tape. It is an intricate, multi-layered dance of timing, leverage, injury risk, salary cap projections, and scheme fit.
Yep, it's a giant puzzle.
Time and ultimately performance on the field will be the final judges of these massive contracts. I highly suggest to our listeners that diving deeper into the analytical grades in our source material provides even more fascinating context for how these cascading decisions were made.
Absolutely. The front office has made their bed, and now the entire organization has to lie in it. If the medical's clear and Steichen's scheme hums, they look like visionaries. If not, we are looking at a multi-year rebuild.
And we will be watching every single snap to see which reality unfolds. Thank you for joining us on The Debate.